the first thing I wanted to ask is for you just to introduce yourself, like you and your group and what you do.
My name is Jerome Corelli. I'm the program director for the African Diaspora Initiative. So what we do is scholarship, leadership, and networking. We have two students who work with us in part-time positions. We also have a scholarship that we give annually. We also recommend scholarships for students.
Would you mind giving us an explanation of like what this event is? Like we know, but just for our watchers and the students.
So this is the 28th annual MLK Commemoration. It's something that happens every year, and it's we have a committee that puts this event on. So it's not just our initiative. I do chair the committee, but we have a whole bunch of people. It's really a university event. You see participation across the board in terms of like who's presenting, from the president to vice president. We also have event services and broadcasting. So we have like a whole bunch of people. So it's basically just an opportunity to bring people together, to have events that are inclusive and try to speak to the legacy of Dr. King.
Even though he's gone, what kind of impact do you think he still has on us today?
It's really that is really complex, right? Because it's like one level of it is like what his impact is, and then another level is like what people want his impact to be, whether for positive or negative. Like you'll hear a lot of people what we call co-opting Dr. King. So they may have like a conservative talking point, but then they'll use Dr. King as like their person to be like, well, Dr. King said this, so we shouldn't talk about critical race theory because that acknowledges race, that acknowledges oppression in history, and Dr. King wanted us to be colorblind. So it's very complex because he's not here. So it depends on like how people use him, his memory. There is the Dr. King Center, the King Center, which is run by his family. So I think giving like people who are connected to the family, like the front seat. Like we have Mr. Floyd here to speak on behalf of his brother. So we have to talk to him about how do you want your brother to be represented. We focused on talking about not just the tragedy of his death, but also like his life. If you guys heard them talking about their childhood, because we wanted to show that humanity. But we had to talk to him about that to confirm. So no one should be able to take someone's legacy and use it to fulfill their agenda. So that's really important to kind of like listen to the people who knew that person. So, for example, like Dr. King's family, his daughter Bernice King, said that we shouldn't celebrate Dr. King Day without action. And I think she talked about like voter rights and trying to make sure that people are able to go to the polls and there's nothing keeping people from voting. So when I do things, I try to be in aligned with the people who are most closely connected to that person.
What were the considerations when you guys like chose him? Because there are a lot of people out there that could have done a keynote and had very interesting takes.
Well, George Floyd's brother's name is Philonise Floyd. He's our speaker today. So we have a committee, an MLK committee, and basically after this event, we'll make suggestions. Like we're going to have a follow-up meeting. Who do you guys want for next year? So we try to do something that's relevant that students would be interested in, but also like for this specific one member of our committee suggested, hey, I'm working with this speaking agency and I think we should have Mr. Floyd come. And everybody else was excited. And as chair, I just said, okay, that's what the group wants. Let's go for it. I will say that it's very appropriate because this is my first year as the chair, and I was hired October 1st, 2020, and basically I was hired after the wave of all of these black lives being taken. So Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, different institutions and just different people across the board, you see this sense of social responsibility. So positions like mine are created, not to say that they didn't want these positions before, there were people working on them before, but it creates a push. So I think it's appropriate for us to have Mr. Floyd as our MLK speaker because positions like mine come about at the expense of black suffering of humanity. And so like when we are in like an educated space, in a privileged space, we have to always acknowledge that we didn't get here by ourselves. Like, we have to acknowledge our family and our community, but also acknowledge like the suffering in the world and how that suffering is connected to our opportunity, and like not necessarily carry like a guilty conscience, but just like offer respect. So I actually feel really blessed that this is the event, because I feel like it's divine, it's connected in that way, if that makes sense.
Another question that I kind of wanted to lead into is, so police brutality and racism are huge problems, like plaguing just humanity in general, and it obviously can't all be solved by one person. But what do you think the individual can do to, kind of do their part and try and make things better?
Thank you for the question, Jeremy. Mr. Floyd is saying that there's a George Floyd bill, that they were trying to make sure that there were no chokeholds and the no-knock warrants, and also to get rid of immunity for police officers, that everybody should be treated equally before the law. So I think finding out about people who are doing the work, like Mr. Floyd, and the activists that they're connected to, and then just supporting those activists and supporting that work. Something that people also really want more of is for mental health related issues, for mental health service providers to come to the scene rather than a police officer, because it can escalate because they have a weapon, and it's not really something that will calm someone down if they're triggered. So I don't know, maybe even giving people who want to get into law enforcement other alternatives, like whether it's like combining it with like a master's in social work or just programs like that, so they have options if that field shrinks. We want people to have jobs, so just giving people opportunities to serve communities, to protect and serve, that aren't necessarily the traditional role, because everything has to evolve. So what does a police officer evolve into? So we shouldn't look at it like we're trying to take away people's jobs. We should look at it, we need a new version of what it means to protect and serve. And that's what I personally feel, because you do hear a lot of activists and anti-racists saying that we need mental health professionals to respond to some of these crises. And I think that's a good way, because it doesn't attack the police officers themselves and make them feel like they're going to lose their jobs. Like, as long as they're given a pathway to contribute to our communities and nation in a healthier way that works for everyone, I think that's a good solution for everyone.